Hello folks, it's me, Kerbanaut here, and today we are going to do another episode of Let's Actually Play Kerbal Space Program. I haven't released a video in, 2 weeks or something, and it's been bugging me because I've had to do a lot of stuff for university, but nonetheless, we shall prevail and we shall continue to explore the Kerbal system and, all of the bodies in it. So, first up in this episode, on the long list of things to do in this episode, is a probe that we're sending out into the depths of space. And you may ask, where is this probe going? This probe is going to be going to one of the little smaller planets that, nobody really seems to appreciate. I just kind of seems to forget. I mean, I certainly seem to forget it a lot of the time, but with Kerbal Alarm Clock installed, I do not forget this transfer window, and we send it on its way. Yes, indeed, this probe is going to be going to Moho. This little planet is the innermost planet of the Kerbal system, and is actually at a bit of an inclination in comparison with Kerbin. So it's a bit difficult to get to Moho. Okay, but we can't continue to go with the Moho probe. We can't see it to its correction burn. We have to switch over to the Celia station. The Celia station, if you remember from the last episode, was in transit going to minmus. And of course we get into position to do a little bit of a correction burn here, and just get it into a closer encounter with a nice low periapse. And of course we can warp in and get into the sphere of influence of this lovely pale bluey green minty flavoured moon. Now we get our periapse nice and low so that we have a low gravitational potential energy and high kinetic energy, because that means we're going faster. This is kind of very important when it comes to the Oberth effect, because the Oberth effect is basically when you're traveling faster, you get more out of your engine, you get more out of your burn when you're traveling faster. And so, meaning if we get ourselves a nice low periapse, it means that we get more for our burn, rather than if we had a very high periapse. Anyway, we're coming in. We do some science just in high orbit around minmus. We don't want to lose out on this any science that we can get. It's always important to grab every single last drop of it and squeeze it from the planet and all of its orbital bodies and biomes, and because that's not weird. Anyway, we do get into orbit. This is us doing our insertion burn. We're bringing ourselves in, and the one nuclear engine that we've got in here is doing its job very well in Minimus's low gravity. We are slowing ourselves down and bringing ourselves into a relatively circular orbit so that we can continue to do science and such. Anyway, it's time to swap back to this probe and do a little bit of a correction burn, because you'll see that Moho is on a rather different plane to us, and so we have to do a very big correction burn. Thankfully though, it's not that much bother. We do have the technology to give us the delta V to get into this strange, slightly off kilter, slightly squint orbit. I think Moho's just a wee bit drunk. I'm pretty sure Moho was just drunk one day and just kind of got into some weird orbit. I'm pretty sure that's how orbital mechanics work. Anyway, there we go. That's us changed planes, and we are ready to go and encounter Moho. And there we go. We've got our encounter set up, ready to go down. Now we will have to, of course, make a correction burn, because right now we've got an encounter quite high over Moho, and it's not going to be very good. We're just going to get the science for high over Moho. It's not going to be good. So what we do is we set a reminder for periapse, and basically what that'll do is Kerbal Alarm Clock will just pop up, give me a reminder when we hit periapse, and we'll just do a correction burn at periapse. Okay, so hopping over to the Research and Development Center, we can take a look at something new and interesting that we're going to do. So we researched some plane parts, and here we go. So this is a little bit of a plane that we've got going for us. Now we do the science right there before we lift off, because last time I tried this, I tried to transmit the science before we lifted off, and it broke off my antenna, and you'll see why in just a second. So here we go, we just start transmitting the science right here. Lovely stuff. And the antenna pops out of the bottom there. We have actually got a fairing along part of the ship, and that just hides a bunch of science equipment and the antenna that we're using. Now we do get quite far out here, mainly because I was hoping that we could transmit it all, and I had to keep the engine running to keep producing electricity, because I don't know, I don't think I had enough solar panels on this plane to power the thing, and we flip out, because that's just how we do things, really. Thankfully though, when we get into the lower atmosphere where it's a bit thicker, we gain control and fly onward. Now, this plane is a bit of a nuisance to fly. Just generally I'm not the best pilot anyway, but it's just a bit of a nuisance to fly. So I try to get it down as fast as possible. Perhaps we can get it down onto the landing strip here, but alas, we're going too fast and I can't seem to get control over the airplane, and we have to just rely on landing back at the KSC. Now, of course, as I said, I'm not the best pilot, so I try landing it on the ground instead of the runway because I can't aim for my life. And I think I'm getting it. No, what's going on? It flips out of control and burns, and tis a shame that we have to, go through this horrible thing. Anyway, we shall forever remember the brave pilot that gave his life to get absolutely no science, just for the fun of it. Anyway, next up is an interesting little ship that we're going to use to ferry Kerbals from low Kerbin orbit to both low lunar orbit and low minmus orbit. This is a shuttle between Kerbin and its two moons, because we are going to have orbital bases, and perhaps maybe at some point we're going to put some bases down on the surface of one or even both of these moons, and so we're going to have to set up some way to kind of get to and from there without just having to launch a ship every time we want to send Kerbals to and from there. And so I came up with this. This is using a couple of parts from a mod. This is one of the first parts mods that I have installed in this game. I only installed it a wee while ago. And I installed it because I saw it on the forums and I absolutely adored it. It is just such a beautiful pack, and it's very stock-like as well. What it does is it basically adds a few parts that expand the Mark II airplane parts. Now, although we have a lot of other things that we can make shuttles out of, I just loved the look of this. And, I didn't have a lot of wings, so I wasn't going to make an SSTO with this thing, so I figured stick a couple of nuclear engines on it, launch up into space. It's a pretty badass, transit vehicle. And it works pretty well. Not very well, as you can see from my constant having to, turn the spaceship, in different directions. And this is because I did not design this spaceship very well, to be honest. First of all, the RCS is, all squint, and I don't have control in certain directions. But anyway, we do dock, and we launch off this little probe, and just kind of throw it into space, and, let it go on its way. Only to find out that it has no fuel. None whatsoever. I wonder what could have happened there. Well, you guessed it. We did not turn off crossfeed on that docking port, and the nuclear engines just hogged all the fuel from that tiny little probe, leaving it without fuel and perhaps without purpose. So it's just going to have to float in minimus orbit all alone without any control. Thankfully though, it is a probe, so you know, it doesn't get lonely, I suppose, unless it develops some kind of artificial intelligence, in which case I'm not even mad if it gets lonely. If it develops artificial intelligence, well done for it, you know, I'll send out a separate mission just to get it back if it develops artificial intelligence. Anyway, you can see that we have gained a little bit of science from that probe, and we head back to kind of Kerbin. However, as I said, I did not design this ship well, and so I figure I'm just going to crash it back into Kerbin. I hate this thing. I can't stand it. It's a pain to dock. Some of the solar panels are squint. It's just really, really bad. And after I spent so much time getting it into orbit and finding that probe was kind of, you know, not even useful, I really hated it. And I just wanted to burn it up. And so with a little bit of a fire show and blowing up before it even hit the ground, I managed to burn it up in Kerbin's atmosphere. And here we go. This is another ship that looks quite similar to the last thing that we just burned up. So you might be asking, why are you making another one of these if the first one didn't work? Well, the first one didn't work because I designed it badly. This one, however, I've purposefully designed to be a bit better. So I've straightened out some of the solar panels, I've given it a bigger cargo bay, and I've also added a lot more RCS thrusters in certain directions so that we do have control in all directions. Now, of course, it is a bit of a pain to fly just because of the way the docking ports are set up, but you know, that's just what's going to happen with any kind of ship that's configured like this. And I'm willing to sacrifice a bit of kind of maneuverability or a bit of kind of ease of use just so that it looks cool. And it does look pretty darn awesome, if you ask me. Anyway, what we do is we detach our pusher. Now that we've connected up the transit vehicle, we detach our pusher and we detach the little lander there because we're going to begin landing on Minmus and basically ripping up all of the science that it has to offer and bringing it back to Kerbin so that we can gain much from its, you know, bounty of science, I guess. Hopefully, we'll also be able to pack away some of its soil and eat it on the return trip, because that would be very, very delicious. And here we go, we are landing on the strange, bluey-green surface of Minmus. And we do some science, and some interesting observations are made. Perhaps this will give us more insight into this strange surface, or perhaps not. Perhaps we'll just stick our head into the ground and munch away. And we plant a flag and continue on our journey, because we have got a lot of work to do. These Kerbals have a big task ahead of them. They have to go around and explore all of the little crevices on Minmus and gather all the science that it has to offer. Perhaps not in one mission, they don't have the fuel for that, but you know, with the fuel that they do have, they can go quite a bit of the way towards completing their mission, perhaps almost 2/3 of the way. Anyway, we get some more science, and of course we can't override the old some of the science that we already have, so we transmit what we can, keep what we can't, and really it's just all about managing what science we get. Now, we get out, do a little bit of EVA reports, and find that we're probably still in the same biome. And because we haven't transmitted any of the science, it doesn't tell us until we kind of get out. Anyway, we move biome and get some more science. Now, we aren't going to do experiments here such as the materials-based study or the mystery goo study, only because we've already used those in the previous biome, and so we'll come back at a later time to get those science. But what we can do is we can get some EVA reports and some soil samples. Hopefully the Kerbals won't munch them. And this is a night landing, or perhaps it's not a night landing as much as it is landing at the poles. And yeah, this is indeed the poles, but because it's the poles, the sun is very low in the sky. Now, on the Apollo landings, what they did was very similar to this. Although they didn't land at the poles, as such, they did land at the kind of, I think it's called the Terminator, when day turns to night. That kind of allows, or you know, near it, I think, when the sun is lower in the sky at least. That just kind of allows for better seeing how high you are. I don't know what you call that, but basically all the rocks on the surface will cast shadows instead of just having the sun straight overhead and casting no shadows. So it's very easy to tell how high you are, and that's important when you're landing, especially on a celestial body that you don't know a lot about. Anyway, we return to orbit to transfer a lot of the science that we've gained from that one mission, and the docking procedure goes well. Instead of docking where we were previously docked, we head towards the docking port on our fuel kind of holder, fuel canister. I think it's a bit big to call it a canister, but we do head toward it, and using the power of RCS and perhaps a bit of the Force, we do get a dock, and we dock up. And after a bit of fuel transfer and a bit of science transfer and resetting all of our experiments, we continue and we head off into the abyss of space. Well, technically we're heading to Minimus. Minimus is, land, but abyss of space sounds cooler, let's be honest. Anyway, here we go. We are getting round and aiming for another biome. Now, let's do a retrograde burn and bring ourselves down over a specific place that I can't remember. I'm terrible. But we do indeed land a couple more times. This is us coming in for another landing. You can see we are passing over one of our previous landing spots. But we're not going to go back there because we've already gained the science from that place. Anyway, we warp to our destination. Yes, we are heading back to the poles. Mainly because we haven't got some of the science that we needed. For example, the mystery goo containers, the material study. All of these things actually give you a lot of science. However, we didn't manage to get it last time we landed because we had already used those experiments in the previous biome, and so we go back just to get that. And a nice simple landing procedure, and in the low gravity of Minimus, it is a lot easier to land and it takes a lot less delta V, which is always good. I love having kind of easy landings. I remember when I first started trying to land, and especially precision landing, it was extremely difficult. And it kind of always has been difficult, but it kind of you get used to it over time, I suppose. Anyway, we've landed, we gain the science from that biome, and we redock with the mothership, with Celia Station. And again, we do the whole fuel transfer and the whole science transfer, going down and just grabbing the science in this spaceship here. And really, I can't stand doing this. I really don't like doing that. Nonetheless, we do we do gain the science and undock. Returning, once again, you guessed it, to the surface of Minimus. Basically, a lot of this episode is just gaining science, because we need science to go places. And the best way to get science is biome hopping, really. It would be even more efficient if we just placed a rover down with like a big base and just wheeled around Minimus and the moon on a big rover. But it is also slower doing that. So, but perhaps we'll do that in the future. Who knows? Anyway, we've gained even more science. Another mission successful. All done. We can continue on our way. You can see the lighting from the lander on the spaceship there. It's quite cool. Nonetheless, we do dock. We get docked, lovely, and take our little Kerbal out to explore the realms of this spaceship and gather the wonderful bounties of science. Next up, though, we're doing something completely different. One thing that I think is long overdue for the space program, and that is sending up something very interesting. So, with the new update of 0.25, we gained asteroids, and yes, we gained asteroids. So what I'm doing is I'm launching up a very big satellite, rather unrealistically big, and it's going to sit in orbit quite high, and look out over the stars and examine things. And this spaceship, this telescope, if you will, is called Duster. Why, you may ask, is it called Duster? Well, you may notice a lot of the description for planets show that they started off thinking that they were pieces of dust, but after trying to wipe the lens, they realised that it wasn't a piece of dust. And so the Kerbals have got increasingly lazy and can't be bothered wiping the lens anymore. And so what they've done is they've launched up that spacecraft just to double check if there's any dust, because there's significantly less dust in space than there is on Kerbin. And so with two telescopes, it's a lot easier to define what is actually little specks of dust and what is maybe celestial bodies or perhaps asteroids. Next up is this is a space station. One thing that really needs to go into orbit is a space station. We have the Celia station around orbit. It has gone to the moon. It is now at Minmus, and yet we do not have a constant space station around orbit at Kerbin. And this is a big thing, and it's very annoying for me. I think space stations are awesome, and we should always have more. I don't think there's ever enough space stations, unless you have one pretty epic space station. Anyway, this is another part. We're launching up to the space station. Now we have called the space station Sphery Station. I don't know why, I just thought it was a cool name at the time, so I guess it's now called Sphery Station. I guess it's got a spherical orbit, or perhaps a circular orbit, but you know, 2 dimensions is not enough. We must go 3-dimensional and do spherical orbits. Anyway, yes, we dock up this new module to the Sphery Station and continue on our way. What you did notice a while back is I did just unlock the claw, which is very important when it comes to future missions. We're going to be using that claw to do a few interesting things, not only with asteroids, but with other parts, and maybe cleaning up some debris as well. Anyway, you can see here that we're just launching off some of the old stuff that took us into orbit here, and just make sure it has a nice low periaps that goes under the atmosphere and so it can burn up. Next up is a new and improved version of the shuttle from Kerbin to LKO. This is a beauty of a ship. I love this ship. I can't explain how much I love it. It looks delicious, and honestly, I would I would just want to hug it and never let it go. I love this ship. It looks awesome, and it does the job as well. It takes the Kerbals up into a low Kerbin orbit to rendezvous with Sphery Station. And, you know, this is the same basic upper stage as before. I've just managed to adapt it to fit with the long-burning booster that takes it up into a place where you can get into orbit. And we just use the RCS here to get into an orbit here because we don't need to use the engines. We have more than enough RCS, and the Sphery Station doesn't have anything that's going to hold it, so we might as well burn it off. The more weight we burn off, the easier it will be to slow down when we come to actually rendezvousing with the station. And so we could just literally use the RCS to get us into orbit, which I find is very impressive. Anyway, we get up to our apoaps and we start to burn, and we also have to make a slight plane change. Anyway, we do get in nice and close to Sphery Station, begin our docking procedure, coming in nice and close, and just acquiring our targets and docking up, and it's starting to look like a really decent space station. And that is good, because, you know, looks are everything. However, that being said, we find a little problem with our station. And that problem is the fact that it's not lined up properly. Previously we didn't have RCS to dock these two modules together, and because of that, it's a bit dodgy. You can see us moving a couple of Kerbals out, but the lander can there, the Mark II I believe it is not lined up with the hitchhiker storage container. And so what we do is we use this crew shuttle to just spin it around, undock, and dock it up again, which is made a lot more easy just with the use of the docking alignment indicator, which tells us which way the ship is rotated in relation to each other. And we come in for another docking just to slap that ship on the side and continue with our lives. Those Kerbals can relax in low Kerbin orbit as we bring this ship back. Now we have moved all of the science that we've done throughout the minmus landings and in high orbit around minmus to this ship here. We also have Bill and Bob, I think, in this ship as well. So we've got some crew, we've got some science. It's doing its job very well, and its job is to bring stuff back to Kerbin. And so we use the two very efficient nuclear engines to bring us back into orbit around Kerbin. And we don't even use aero braking here. We do even just use engines those nuclear engines to bring us into orbit, which works fine. And it means that we're not risking blowing up, which is always good, especially when you've got two high caliber pilots on board. And in the daylight, we can now go out and do the wonderful things, taking the science over to that shuttle, so we can go back to Kerbin. Now, I've actually been kind of watching a lot of documentaries and such on the, Mercury program and, early Apollo missions and such, and it's actually really, really interesting. Some of the first EVAs, they didn't want people to be, outside during the dark because it gets really, really cold. And the first EVAs, they didn't have any of the kind of RCS or anything on their suits. They just kind of dangled about with cords attached to the spaceship, and it was extremely hard to control yourself in zero gravity like that. It was actually kind of a scuba diver that was ended up being very, very well fit to do EVAs because neutral buoyancy and when you're scuba diving is very similar to zero gravity. Anyway, here we go. We are returning all these pilots to Kerbin, bringing them down, and we did try to get them right next to the Kerbal Space Center, but alas, we failed, and we're bringing them down over the mountains, just a little away from the space center. We deploy the parachutes, and we come down for this landing. Now, we don't detach the heat shield before. We want to just kind of let the parachutes open, and then we detach the heat shield so we can just watch it explode. I've noticed that if you try to detach the heat shield before the parachutes are deployed, it just wants to stick to the bottom of your spacecraft, so there's no real point in detaching it. Anyway, we get a little bit more science from the hills from the mountainous areas of Kerbin, getting some EVA science, and just exploring that little bit of hilly area on Kerbin, and perhaps it's just a little bit nice for these Kerbals to go out for a little bit of breath of fresh air. Anyway, to finish up this episode, we have a look at the Research and Development Center and have a look at some of the interesting things that we can purchase. We take a look at some of the aircraft parts and decide to research them. This is going to be very important next episode when we take a look at SSTOs and other forms of aircraft. But until then, I will see you next time. Bye bye.